So a very, very, very warm welcome to everybody. This is number 4 or 5, I can't honestly remember, in the series of the book gathering. So we've got the wonderful, big, massive hearted Dr. Bill Pettit with us in the house today. Really, really grateful that he's here. He's one of the contributors to the book, Inside Out Transformation. Thank you for the hearts, that's lovely. For Bill, obviously. And yeah, we've been having a little chat behind the scenes just of his wonderful tour in Europe that he's just back from. I'm sure he'll perhaps have something to say about that. So very, very grateful that Bill's given his time today. And to give him the official sort of intro, to let you know what he's about, who he is, where he's been, and who knows where he's going next, but this is where he's been. So Dr. Bill Pettit is co-owner with his wife, Linda Pettit, of 3 Principles Intervention, LLC. He's presented the 3 universal principles of mind, consciousness, and thought as the essence of his psychiatric practice since 1983. He retired from clinical psychiatry in December of 2018, and he presently serves as a 3 Principles mentor, wellbeing coach, and mental health educator on a full-time basis. He enjoys mentoring individuals, groups, and organizations nationally and internationally. So Dr. Pettit has so far created 5 online courses under the series title of One Cause, One Cure, and you can find all those on his website, which we will be sharing later on in the call. So welcome, Bill. Lovely to have you here today. Really, really grateful, as I said, to have your time today.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I was thinking just a little bit before we started speaking, the first time I met you was, and we were talking about the conference in London, I think it was probably about 10 years ago. And wow. I was sitting in the audience at the conference in London, and I'd never heard of you. I'd never heard you speak before, but I was just glued to my chair. And I can remember I was so impacted by hearing you speak that I was due to go off to another breakout session. I remember this really clearly, and I was like, no, I'm staying here, because you were doing a breakout session straight after that one. And I thought, I just got to sit here and listen to some more of this man. So it's been 10 years since I first heard you speak, and I'm impacted by hearing you speak to this day. So I'm really, want to say a huge thank you for your continued sharing, because I know you just had a big birthday, and a lot of people would have, is that what the word retired anymore? I'm not sure, but sort of be on the golf course, enjoying the beach. I don't know, but whatever people choose. But here you are, still at it in a way, and still sharing these principles. So I thank you for that, and thank you for taking part in the book. Really grateful for that. And I wanted to start off by addressing one of the very last question I asked you, which was, could you share a story or stories of what worked well and what didn't, and what were the takeaways for you? And here's the first part of your answer. You said, since being a student and sharer of the three universal principles since April 1983, I remember that was April the 1st. I've heard you say that many times. I've witnessed literally thousands of people who have been labelled with multiple psychiatric diagnoses find a life permeated with love, lightheartedness, wisdom, productivity, creativity, and vitality that they had believed impossible. So really, first of all, what I'd really love is if you could share, and I've heard you share loads and loads of stories over the time, but I think the fact that you have seen literally thousands of people, and I'm going to use the word transform, even it's the name of the book, this inside out transformation. You've witnessed so many people have this transformation. Would you share a couple of the stories, just so that people get a sense of, because there's going to be people who've never heard of the principles and never heard of this before that will find these recordings. And I'd love for you just to sort of illustrate the impact, what's possible.
Wow. Well, my thought is that most people have heard all of these stories 15 times, and so I'm always reluctant to do that, but I'm glad to. The first transformation, I think, that always has to occur, it certainly occurred for me, is my own. And it wasn't immediate. It wasn't, the first story I will share is that of a man that had the label of chronic schizophrenia for 47 years. And this was only 6 months after I had met, less than 6 months after I had met Sid. And he actually saw, as I will explain, he saw deeper than I had seen. Now, I have to write that in my book, because here I am with 26 and a half years of education, and went in 1983 with 10 years in psychiatry and 14 years out of medical school. And here, let's see, April, May, June, July, August, probably 4 months later, after meeting Sid Banks, this man has a complete recovery. And he, as I will share, he saw more than I saw. But I'm going to start with my own experience in April 1st of 1983, briefly, when after I'd met George Pransky and on January 1st of that year, and then met with him in March. And he told me, after the 2 hours of meeting, subsequently, he told me that Sid was coming to San Francisco at a hotel for a Friday evening and Saturday and Sunday program. And I think there was over 200, maybe 250 people. It was amazing. This is 1983, almost 40 years ago. And as I sat there and listened, and many people have heard this, but within 30 minutes, I had been going out and out of clinical depression for 20 years. I had seen 6 different psychiatrists, and they had helped me through very difficult times in my schooling, undergrad, my medical school, my residency, and even my work after residency. And they had helped me make it through those times without having to stop my education or my work. I mean, I was never hospitalized. I might have been on medicines briefly at times, but they didn't seem to sit well with me. But I, at times, was almost immobilized with my depression, and yet I made it through. I went through medical school. If you use the metaphor of an 8-cylinder car, I feel like I went through medical school alternating between 2 to 3 and at maximum 4 cylinders out of 8. So that when I started to experience the wholeness and the health again, some of my classmates thought I was crazy, because I'd say, I'd love to go through medical school again with a new, fresh presence and curiosity and understanding, and having every bit of me available. So that was that was where I was as I sat there on April Fool's Day in 1983, and within 30 minutes, and I can't explain why, but except that Sid, when he talks, those that have listened to his videos, he's talking to your soul. He's talking to that non-material aspect of being a human being. He's not talking to this laptop computer that we carry around in our heads. He's talking to the place we're connected to, the divine energy that we can't be separate from, that's called by a lot of people called God. And I remember having the experience of like 250 or 300 pounds of weight just leaving my chest and my shoulders, and wasn't planning on it, but I get choked up inside just thinking of what that meant to me, because I suddenly felt hope. And now here's where, and I'll show the difference between Herb and I suddenly realized that my depression for this, first of all, I realized that I was not broken. I was not broken. I had nothing lacking. That was huge. That I was whole. was whole. And the only thing that had kept me from experiencing that wholeness, instead I experienced a whole, H-O-L-E, instead of a W-H-O-L-E-N-E-S-S, was what Sid refers to on page 7 of the missing link as my level of spiritual and psychological understanding. That I did not realize at that point the connection between my spiritual nature and my psychological nature. And that because of that, I had relied on the only thing that I was aware of as a resource, which was my analytical ability, my brain, my personal thinking, my intellect, my use of personal mind. Many of you heard me say that I loved and I always block on his name, the American Jewish movie maker who made a movie many years ago called The Sleeper. And when he awoke from being asleep for 25 years in the movie, Woody Allen, when he awoke and realized he'd been asleep for 25 years, he said, "Oh my gosh, 25 years. I could have been halfway through my analysis." Well, I was 40 years old at the time that I met Sid, and I had been asleep for 40 years, or maybe not totally 40, maybe after 4 or 5 years so 35 years, when I started being self-conscious and being frightened by the thoughts that were stored in my head, or that I created in response to situations. And so I had gone through life thinking that I was broken, that I had something lacking, that there was something wrong with me, that it was because of my genes, it was because of my family history on both sides of depression and alcoholism, and even a history of suicide, that I was kind of screwed. And then on top of that, I had all these external circumstances, other people, places, and things that had occurred to me when I was growing up, and my present challenges that we mistakenly think we call stressors. We give inert objects a power that they don't have. And it's not to say that there aren't significant challenges and hardships, but I will make a case until I die that we replace trauma and stressors with hardship and challenges. But anyway, as I sat there, I suddenly realized that metaphorically, my depression had been coming from me metaphorically using the power, this divine gift of thought given to navigate our way through and experience, along with consciousness and mind, experience this thing we call life, that I had been spending 6 to 9 hours a day for at least 20 years doing this, and then wondering at the end of each day why I had another right-sided headache, totally oblivious that I had anything to do with it at all. The exciting thing about realizing that it was coming, my depression, my dysthymia, my irritability, my anger, everything that I was experiencing was a thought-created experience that originated within me and my use of these principles. Even though I didn't immediately see how to stop doing it, but I saw that I was doing it, and it wasn't all those things that I thought were causing it, that I had no control over. Past was over. Present circumstances, most of the people and things I had no control over their behavior or so yeah, that was huge. Now, fast forward 6 months later, or 4 months later, when I had resigned my job in California and was headed to Florida to be with Roger Mills and Rick Suarez and Kim Cadu, who were all 3 PhDs that were in Coral Gables, Florida, outside of Miami. And they were being mentored by Sid. And Sid had told me after that weekend, I met with people like Mark Howard and Keith Blevins and other people that were there at the conference. And Sid said, I think it would be good, Bill, if you went to Coral Gables. So I was on my way there. We stopped in Illinois. Those people that know the United States, they usually know Chicago. We were about 180 miles southwest of Chicago, where I grew up, and had gone to medical school there at the University of Chicago. And so we stopped there. And the first thing that happened that second thing that happened after this realization that I was whole and that I was the creator of my experience moment to moment and my depressions, was that when I saw my father, I saw him for the first time in my life through eyes of unconditional love. He and I had, not physically, but we'd been like this, and we could not even sit down to watch a sporting event without a 50% chance, at least one of us storming out of the room because we saw something differently than the other and was invested in enough in our way of seeing things that we couldn't tolerate continuing the discussion. And I saw my father through eyes of unconditional love, and what a magnificent human being he was. And a human being, yes, who was operating from his level of understanding, but with love in his heart. And my father told me more stories in the next 3 days than he had told me in over 40 years of living, because I'm sure he must have felt it. We never spoke about it. So in that place of feeling love more and more for myself and seeing the beauty and the wholeness, and even at times the divine in other people, I went to work at the state hospital that had 700 patients. And as a consultant, and actually there was only one for 700 patients in a psychiatric hospital, 350 of which were psychiatric and 350 were autism and what we used to call mental retardation, developmental disability that limited people's ability to use their computer, if you will. The only psychiatrist for the whole hospital sat in the front office as the medical director. The other doctors on the units were family physicians who had taken courses in psychotropic medication. So I was the only psychiatrist for 700 people. I was working there 3 days a week or so, or 4 days a week. And I would go from ward to ward, and I befriended a psychologist who had a terrible panic disorder that was inhibiting him from doing what he wanted to do in the theater in his local village, his local small town nearby. And he thought that I was crazy or full of however crap. I'll be nice, I won't use the S word. Sid Shaw, Rabbi Shaw would be proud of me. I kept telling him that people were whole and that everybody in the hospital had perfect mental well-being. And he just thought I was crazy. And yet he wanted to keep having lunch with me. And within about 4 weeks, his panic disorder disappeared. And he got the lead role in his local theater, but he had no idea where his panic disorder went to. It just disappeared. It's unbelievable. But he did ask me to co-lead a group with 21 or 22 people with the diagnosis of chronic schizophrenia on Wednesday afternoons. And many have heard this story, and I'll tell is one of 3 that come to mind right now that I think might be relevant. Because I think schizophrenia, manic depressive disorder, and complex PTSD are 3 things that people do not see, that you can have that label and be totally mentally healthy, right? So I'm in the lecture in this group at this state hospital in Galesburg, Illinois, with this psychologist on a Wednesday afternoon, and it was the 3rd week that we had met from 12 to 1, and then there was this man over in the left side probably at about 10 o'clock, if you think of a clock, and he had his chair askew and wasn't really in the group, and he was talking quietly to his auditory hallucinations during the group, the whole time, the first, second, and halfway through the third. And he wasn't disruptive, so I didn't say anything. I didn't feel a need to. And suddenly he started laughing, and not just laughing, Sheila, but we've all, at least most people, have had the experience of somebody having a belly laugh where their eyes start watering, and before you know it, you can't, it's contagious. It's more contagious than the damn COVID, because immediately everybody in the whole group was holding their stomachs, begging Herb to stop, including the 21 patients and the psychologist and I, and he went on for 7 to 10 minutes. He would stop occasionally, and then just when I was going to say something, he'd start up again because he'd have another insight. And I have to, because of our time, I'm going to limit the story because it was just amazing what he told us afterwards. But when he finally stopped laughing, I waited till he wiped his eyes and got his breathing okay. And I asked the psychologist, I said, who is that man? He said, I said, what's his name? He said, his name's Herb. He's been here 67 years old. He's been here 47 years in the state hospital. They've tried to get him out a couple of times, but he was right back. I said, you kidding me? He said, no. So I waited till Herb got his breathing and his eyes wiped and his breathing normal. And I said, Herb, as I recall, I said, Herb, could you please tell us what was so funny? And Herb picked up his chair, Sheila, and he got in the group for the first time, and he looked across and made eye contact with me, just as you're making eye contact on Zoom right now. And he said, Doctor, while you were talking, I suddenly realized that I've been making myself crazy with my own thinking for 47 years. Pardon me? And then he said something that I hadn't seen yet. I had hoped that I might stop or learn how to at least lessen the times and the force with which I hit my head metaphorically with my thinking. But Herb saw beyond me. He said, I see that I've been making myself crazy for 47 years, and I don't have to do it anymore. And there was a profound certainty in his voice. And I had a 3-year follow-up. When we finally did get him out of the hospital, you can imagine it took me, I had to first get him off his medications, because his whole list of medications were now causing terrible, his physiology shifted instantaneously from 10 to 12 hours of activating the stress response to 0 to 10 minutes, I don't know, a day. And so that his medicines became poison. And I had to, as quickly and as safely as possible over the next 2 to 3 weeks, get him off all of his medications. And then the director said I had to wait 6 weeks, and he got an apartment, went to his hometown. I would, from the psychologist who didn't understand what happened. He kept giving me follow-ups up to 3 years afterwards. He was fine. He had a girlfriend. He'd go down to the senior center. He was dancing. They were going dancing, going to movies. He was on no medication. He jumped the boundaries of time, space, and matter. And he jumped me, this man with 26 and a half years of education. And I instead have, for 39 and a half years, learned, seen, realized these principles. Sid says there's an infinite number of doors of understanding. I don't know how many Herb went through that day, but it was one hell of a lot. I've been going through 1 or 2 at a time for 39 and a half years. And maybe that's what makes me a decent teacher, is that it didn't happen. Maybe if it had happened all at once, like it happened to Herb, I'd think, not that I don't have hope that can happen for anybody, but I also have compassion for those that, like myself, that have just seen it incrementally. and seen the value of just having gratitude for that rather than measuring myself comparatively with somebody else that I think is seeing it faster. That gratitude is said over and over is the key. Now I'm aware of the time and I've already used 27 minutes, but I'm going to try to do two more quick ones. Is that okay? Again, people may have heard this. I was covering at West Virginia University. I was covering on the adult unit for my good friend Don Fiddler, who took a 2-week vacation. And so this young woman, one of my first patients that first day, was her fifth admission. She was very psychotic in a full-blown mania. For those people that don't know, she had not slept in 45 hours. She was talking 280 miles an hour. Gibberish I could not, she knew what she was trying to express. I couldn't, as best as I listened, could not tell hide in her hair what she was trying to say. She was a cute little gal. She was married. She had a 6-year-old little boy. She had a degree in psychology. And I sat for 3 minutes this was her 5th admission in 7 months. I don't know if all of them had been psychotic, but more than one had been. She was fully psychotic. She was on 2,100 milligrams of lithium, which is a very high dose. She was on the maximum amount of what in the United States is called Seroquel, but it's quetiapine. It's an antipsychotic. 800 milligrams is the maximum dose. And she was not even touched by it. So I asked her if she could stop for 60 seconds. If she thought she could stop talking, I knew that she was feeling incredible pressure to keep talking, but to raise her hand if she could give me 60 seconds. And finally, within a minute or two, she raised her hand and I started talking. And I basically said, Molly, you are perfectly mentally healthy. You just don't know it. You've gotten caught up in some negative thinking. You've activated your stress response. You've even made some epigenetic changes that you can't even communicate what you want, but you are whole and completely mentally healthy, but for what you're innocently doing with your thinking. Fast forward 6 months, she's now in nursing school because she fired her psychiatrist in the city that she said she had to go on disability, that she couldn't go on. She had a serious mental illness and needed to go on disability. And she fired that psychiatrist and sought me out as a psychiatrist. And within 6 months later, I'm presenting her at grand rounds to the whole entire department of psychiatry at the University of West Virginia, including the chief of psychiatry, the residents, the nurses, the social workers, all the people in training at a university. And she and I are sitting next to each other telling her story. Not only did her mania go away, but her panic attacks went away, and she was now off completely the 800 milligrams of quetiapine, and she was on 300 milligrams instead of 2,100 of lithium. She was doing her nursing degree during the week. She was sleeping 8 hours, 7.5 to 8 hours every night. She was working on the weekends, 2 8-hour shifts as a certified nurse assistant in order to keep insurance for her 6-year-old son while she was going to school. And at the end of this presentation, this psychiatry resident asked Molly, said, Molly, which was a great question, what did you think when in the midst of your manic psychosis, having been awake for 45 hours and talking 250 miles an hour, that Dr. Pettit told you you were completely mentally healthy and whole and mentally well? And she got a little smile on her face and she said, well, the first thought that came to me was, oh my God, they have given me a psychiatrist who's crazier than I am. Which is really brilliant, that in the midst of her psychosis, Sheila, she could say what he just said is freaking crazy. But then she got real quiet and she said, and following that first thought, another thought came from a different place. And I knew that what he had just said was absolutely true. She heard it first from her brain and then from her soul. And that started the healing. That started the healing. And yeah, so she actually presented, she actually worked with Linda and I talked at a mental health clinic for 3 days along the three of us. She worked with us. She became a nurse and a neurological nurse. The third one, after that, after following those 2 weeks that I worked on the unit, the head nurse, who happened to be a male, it didn't matter. He was so struck by what had happened those 2 weeks that he got permission from the other doctors, many of them, that he could give books, Sid Banks's Missing Link, to patients, because many of these people were coming back, revolving door. And, you know, some psychiatrists or some nurses would even say, oh, they don't want to get well. And I would say, no, they do just as much as you and I, but they're not getting what they need. So he asked if I would bring over from the medical school where Dr. Judy Sedgman and I were, about 3 or 4 minutes from the psychiatric hospital, the main building of the medical school, if I could bring over 20 missing links. We had a large group of them. So I said, of course I would. So I went over and I took the elevator up to the second floor, and there was a counter there as I got up on the floor, and I was probably 12 to 15 feet away from a woman on the right side of the counter talking to the head nurse on the left side of the counter. And as I came up, the woman was screaming at the nurse, saying, a woman probably in her late 30s, and a nice looking woman who you could tell had some difficult times, but was shouting to the woman, why won't they just let me kill myself? Why is that a problem? Why? Because they were going to send her to the state hospital. I found out later, I didn't know anything then, that this was her 23rd admission over the last 9 years after a brutal rape and being held being held by a past trooper in the state that she was in. And anyway, so I had the 20 books of a missing link, and I'm conscious of not speaking more and more, and not even trying to teach or say anything unless I have somebody who asks me to be. I tell people, you've probably heard me say, Sheila, if I tried to teach, if I had $5 for every time I tried to teach that I didn't have permission for the other person to be a student, I'd have a really nice retirement plan. But anyway, so I came onto the unit and she was screaming, and my mouth started moving, and I did not know what was going to come out. And I said something to the effect, ma'am, whatever it is that you want to kill yourself over is over and only exists now as a memory in your brain. Well, she came, not physically, but she verbally came at me like a wounded animal and started screaming at me that I didn't know who she was, that I had no business talking to her that way, that I didn't even introduce myself, ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. And she went on for 2.5 minutes. And like her earlier, just when I think she was through, she'd have aftershocks and yell something more at me. And I waited for at least 30 or 40 seconds after her last comment. And I said, you know, everything you just said to me is absolutely true. But what I said to you also is absolutely true. And I know what you want. She said, you don't know what I want. I said, yes, I do. You want, like the rest of us, to be at peace, to feel whole, and be able to give and receive love freely. And I left the books and I walked out. Well, I heard later that within 10 seconds, she said, how do I get to see that man when I leave this hospital? She told her mom that afternoon, after 9 years, she said, "Mom, I think I met somebody today that can help me." Now, it was huge right at the beginning, but it took, I mean, she came to my groups. Maybe she didn't have to, but for at least 18 months, she got off, again, a whole list of medications that she was even using drugs and alcohol in combination with, and almost died a number of times. And she went to Florida with her mother, and even spoke with Jan and Chip Chipman in the women's prisons in Florida. And she was getting ready to go to law school when I got a call 4.5 years after she'd left, and doing well, that she and her friend had been killed on a motorcycle when somebody ran through an alcohol person struggling with alcohol ran through a stop sign and killed them. And her mother said, "Yes, I'm grief stricken, Dr. Pettit," when she called me, "but I am filled with gratitude that I had 4.5 years that I never thought that I would have with Nicole." Nicole said I could only tell her story under one condition, and I said her full name. Her name's Nicole Citrangelo. And if you go on my website, or you go on Judy Sedgman's website, there's two 1-hour programs when Judy was at the University of South Florida, where she interviewed me one time on PTSD, and then she interviewed myself with Nicole's mother. And it's very powerful. It shows a beautiful picture of Nicole. She was a beautiful woman. So those are 3 stories that I hope would awaken hope in people, that this is not bullshit. This is real. Everyone is divine energy manifested into a form, everything. We are not separate from the whole. And once we start to realize the connection between our spiritual nature and our psychological nature, happiness and sanity occur naturally and effortlessly. Wow, that's huge. And it's okay that it's incremental. Be gentle with yourself on the journey. Be grateful for each inch forward. It is direction, not the key. When I was in Arizona, I'm actually in Minnesota at my son's place right now, but if I'm in Arizona and I'm trying to get to Alaska, I will do much better going 5 miles an hour north than 85 miles an hour south. Faster speed, but wrong direction. So I'll stop there.
Well, I'm certainly reminded why I was glued to the chair that day 10 years ago. Just beautiful, Bill. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I agree with those stories. If people can't see the power of what are in these principles are pointing to.
Yes, they're metaphor. I think it's important for people to know they're just a metaphor. They don't, they're in form. They're just words. They're pointing to a formless truth. Yeah.
And
the default setting for all human beings is love and understanding. That's revolutionary. And it's saying that the source behind life is not some punishing, judgmental person that's going to even threaten people with eternal torment. That what's behind life, and this is why I can see where people think get it confused with the religion, because it is a theology. It's not, it has no dogma. I have no need to convert anybody. There's no rituals anybody is asked to do. But if you look up the word theology, it is a study or an explanation of the nature and the attributes of what we call God, of what's behind life. And this is revolutionary in that respect, and it is a theology. I think we backed away from that it is saying that what's behind life is pure love and understanding. And you might have heard me say recently that there is in all 195 countries an organization that is totally based on love and understanding, unconditional love and understanding. And if that's true, and I'll say the name of the organization, if that's true, how could that exist if that wasn't what's behind at the source of creation and existence? The organization in all 195 countries based on unconditional love is called grandparenting. And it's not that parents don't want to, all of us that have been parents and our parents don't want to love unconditionally. But many of us have had difficulty doing that because of our insecurity and our fear, what people will think. Will our child act in a way that might get punished by this punishing God? All kinds of things. But every human being that I've ever met, when they're not in a state of insecurity, exhibit love and understanding. Pure love and understanding, unconditional love and understanding. So anyway, again, I'll stop.
You know, I'm so glad you shared that. I'm actually going to become a grandma for the first time in the beginning of December this year. So I'm very excited, and that, you know, just that idea of unconditional love and understanding. I'm like oozing with it already. I'm like, I can't wait.
And to let parents know that that's possible even as a parent.
Yeah.
That's revolutionary.
Yeah.
And that's what's powerful. Yeah. I see we've got all kinds of hands up.
I know. And it's, well, I'll go in order if the hand's going up. So Fatima, you had your hand up first. Would you like to ask Bill something, share something?
Hi, Sheila. Hi, Bill.
Hello.
It is such an honor to be with you in this space again. I've been following your work for a long time, and I'm a little bit saddened. My name is Fatima.
Oh, thank you, Fatima. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
And I've been following your work for a long time, and I'm saddened that you decided to retire. I heard that at the 3P UK conference, because you are such a light in this community, and seeing you and being around you and listening to you is like listening to a part of Sydney Banks. And for you to decide to retire is really sad for me. But the question that I have for you, because in your presentation and the 3 examples that you shared with us, is that you keep referring to the link between the psychological and the spiritual paradigm of the 3P principle. What is that link?
That's what the principles, Fatima, that's what the principles are pointing to. And I will do my best to get a short answer. First of all, the reason that I'm not fully retiring, I will be working probably initially, at least my plan is 1 day a week. I will be probably not be doing individual sessions anymore, unless, except for people that can afford the fee that I will have for my sessions, meant to be for a group of 4 to 6 people. But the reason I'm doing that is because at 80 years of age and still being able to connect my synapses pretty well and being upright, I know that it's important to me. It feels important to share the gift that I've been given of these last 40 years. I don't think any psychiatrist that ever walked this earth has seen the miracles that I've seen in the last 40 years across every diagnostic category. And it's not Bill Pettit. It's not Bill Pettit. That's what needs to become clear. The moment, I will tell you, there's been times in my life when I thought it was Bill Pettit and the magic stopped immediately. Not as a punishment to me, but because I got in the way of being a lens for the light and thought that I was the light, and I'm not. So I wanted to let you know that I see 4 books right presently, the first one being from the first 7 years, and then the next 3 being for the next 11 years, the next 11 years, the next 11 years. And I spoke with my beautiful wife, Linda, last night. I said, you know, as I write book 3 and 4, that will start with yours and my relationship in 2003 in our marriage. And so I'm going to ask you to at least contribute in some ways for that book 3 and 4. So I just know the books will not be written if I don't give them time and attention. My newly forming friendship with Steve Chandler, he said, Bill, somebody told him, what is it? He's written, 30 books and translated in 34 languages. And he asked an author one time, what does it take to write a book? And he said, time and attention. And so I just know that while there's still light, my wife Linda doesn't necessarily like it when I quote Bob Dylan's song, "It's not dark yet, but it's getting there." That's okay. It's okay with me, but I'm grateful. I have friends dying, it seems like every couple of weeks, or going into dementia units, that were brilliant people, far more brilliant than I. So I want you to know that that I'm not retiring from trying to help this message of hope get to mankind and raise the level of consciousness. If there's 4 books, somebody's going to pick them up someday and be deeply touched by them, even if not in my lifetime. So then, answer to your question, I don't know if you heard me as I was preparing my 3rd course called Hope for the Helpers, which the last 2 courses I think are obviously the two most powerful courses that I did, and I put 85 to 100 hours in every one of those courses. I started reading The Enlightened Gardener, Fatima, for the 17th time. Have you heard me talk about the experience of doing that?
No, I haven't.
So I pick up the Enlightened Gardener for the 17th time, and I start to read it, because I'm going to have reading 20 pages at a time for each of the 8 weeks. And I'm going to put this up here. I don't know if you see on the left here, it says A Conference in England, chapter 1. For the first time in my 17 times of reading this book, my personal mind had quieted down enough from fast and furious to calm and curious in that direction, that I saw over to the left side of the page, there was a bold note that said, "A note to the reader." Have you ever seen that on the Enlightened Gardener?
I've read it, but I did not pay attention.
Okay. Well, here's what the author says. In this simple book, I thought, note to the reader. Hell, I think that's me. Maybe I should read this the 17th time. I tell people I learn slowly, but I make up for it by forgetting quickly. So in this simple book, the author endeavors to explain in his own unique way the connection between our spiritual nature and our psychological nature. And if that's still a question for you, Fatima, I would encourage you to slowly, a few pages at a time, to reread The Enlightened Gardener and The Enlightened Gardener Revisited. I mean, I can tell you that what he's saying is, and he also says and I'd never heard him say that on the Great Illusion of the Long Beach videos, he said, when I saw the connection between our spiritual nature and our psychological nature, happiness and sanity came to me effortlessly and naturally. And the horror of my childhood, I'd never heard him use that. I'd listened to those Long Beach lectures at least 50 times. I never heard that word. The horror is a pretty strong word. The horror of my childhood disappeared, and it was replaced by love. And I even saw unconditional, I even saw the beauty in those that had harmed me. Wow. So that's what the principles are. They're an attempt on Sid's part to try to share our spiritual nature, which he says very clearly that God is, you can't be separate from the whole. God is and he doesn't ask anybody else to believe it as dogma, but he said, what I saw was that God is the energy of all things in existence, either in form or formless, and that we are a manifestation of that energy. And we have been given the gift of use of divine consciousness so we can actually be spectators. We can be aware that that's what we are. My lemon tree that I have in the backyard, or Linda and I have in Phoenix, is just as much a manifestation of divine energy as I am, as this book is. It has electrons going 3/4 the speed of light around every atom that exists in the universe in form. But I don't think the lemon tree has the gift of consciousness to use the divine consciousness in a personal way to know that it is what it is. And it also doesn't have the freedom to ignore that divine intelligence that is trying to guide us and every human being through life, every moment of our life, if our personal mind is quiet enough to hear it. So I hope that's helpful. And I wish you well on your journey, and I'm touched by your kind words. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Fatima. So Ellen, we have probably 5 minutes. Do you have a quick question?
Yeah, and I'll do better here. Go ahead.
Well, first, I can't miss an opportunity to say congratulations, Sheila. There's a great saying that says, if I great would have been, I would have done that first. So
I couldn't hear you because you're going in and out.
And Bill, I loved it.
Yeah.
There's a saying, if I knew how great grandparenting was, I would have done that first.
Oh, that's cute. That's cute.
And Bill, I just wanted to share with you something that this first or second time I met you, we were sitting across the room in my house and you said something. And I said, wait, I got to pull out my phone and record that. I've got to share that with my community. And you said to me, Ellen, it wasn't what I said. It was the place inside of me that shared.
Yeah.
And the next morning, my daughter woke up in a really, really, really low state of mind. And I don't remember what I said. But I said something to her. And she called me and said, I don't know what happened, but everything's changed. And it's just been such a powerful, it's continued to resonate with me over the years. And I see how important it is. And I see, as you continue to share the beautiful stories. And I just want to thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. You know, I love the Hebrew saying, words spoken directly from the heart reach the heart.
Yeah.
And I think that it's also just as true that, because I think the heart and truth live in our soul right next to each other, and maybe they're the same thing seen from a different angle. That when we speak from truth, it resonates with the truth inside of people. That's what happened with Molly that day in her midst of her psychosis. I spoke to that place of truth where she knew that that was true. I'm presently reading for the first time, even though it's set on my, I think it's set in my library since 1986, Viktor Frankl's book, The Doctor of the Soul. I've read Man's Search for Meaning, The Doctor and the Soul. And he says a great thing. He says, how can the medical science, is it medical to treat the soul, to speak to the soul, the spiritual aspect? And he says, the great psychiatrist Du Bois once said, one can manage without all that and still be a doctor. But in that case, one should realize that the only thing that makes us different from a veterinarian is the clientele, if we ignore the spirit and the soul. And he said, he wrote this in 1950 something. In my view, the answer is simple. The goal of psychotherapy is to heal the soul. That's what the Greek root means for psychiatrist, one who heals the soul, to make it healthy. Wow. Anyway, thank you.
Oh, Bill, thank you so much. There's some lovely comments for you. in the chat box. Wonderful call. Thank you for asking the question, Fatima. I found Bill's answer so illuminating. Dr. Pettit is certainly a precious gift to the world. I agree. Powerful stories. I'm so glad I did ask that question at the beginning, because even though, I mean, some of what you shared, Bill, I've not heard before, or I've not heard it in the way that you've shared before. Absolutely. And I've heard you speak quite a few times. So it really is what you were saying just now. It's where it's coming from. It's truth meeting truth, soul meeting soul. It's heart meeting
It's
heart.
the feeling.
Right?
It's the feeling, isn't
yeah,
it? It's the feeling.
absolutely.
It's that. It's the feeling. It's not anything intellectual. It's the feeling. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Was there one other question, or that one?
No, I think that hand's gone down. Yeah. But wanted to say, if people, I've just heard, I didn't know that people were thinking you were retired. I didn't hear that. So if people do want to join your group courses, find your online courses, I know you've got your website, which is thedoctorspettit.com, which I will share when I put the recording up. Is there another way that you would like people to get in touch?
Well, we're really in transition. You know, Linda and I feel closer and more in love than we ever have in our entire life. It grows as our own wholeness, you know, our experience, but we also see a different mission. And so I think we're actually going to transition from the Doctor's Pettit. She's developing her own, and I'm developing mine. And so we're kind of in that transition, where the new website I hope to have up by the 1st of August. Oh. And maybe even before then, have where people can start signing up on Tuesdays, those that can form small groups and be able to afford to meet for the 3 80-minute periods that'll be on Tuesdays. So, you know, so we're really in transition. Each day I'm doing what I can and then resting and doing what I can. The last thing that I'll say, and I said it at the conference, and as I spoke around Europe, one lady, when I said this, had been in the principles for about 7 years, tears started streaming down her face spontaneously. And other people, I saw people kind of go like this. And what I simply said was, what I've realized in recent weeks is that I had not valued being rested physically. That I have a whole new value for being rested physically. And I see that when I am rested physically, I do not have to work at quieting my personal mind. When I am rested physically, my personal mind quiets effortlessly and naturally. And as Sid says, when that occurs, divine mind becomes present and guide. You can hear it, you can recognize it and hear it. And so I just encourage people. I see people, we all have really good reasons why we can't be rested. But if I get 10% tired, my efficiency drops at least 80%. So I encourage, you can take them as mumbling from an old man or something to maybe listen to in your heart, that to value being physically rested as incredibly important.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place to end. Thank you so much, Bill. And thank you everybody for being here today. I'm sure that lots of people would love to have more time, but we're on a schedule.
I better get to my other. Oh, I didn't realize the time. Thank you.
Next week we've got Dickin with us, Dickin Bettinger on Wednesday. So look forward to seeing you all again then. Take care, everybody.